Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hive's protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thank you, Global Patties. You know, everybody, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and we know you'd rather us get right to the talk about beekeeping. However, our super sponsors are critical to making all this happen. From the hosting fees to software to hardware to microphones to recorders, they enable each episode. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is the quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. And also check out the new 2 Million Blossoms podcast, also available from the 2 Million Blossoms website and from wherever you download and stream your shows. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're truly happy you're here. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
Doing really good. So we've going to have a little different opening to this episode, so we're going to get right down to business. I guess the first is some disappointing news for the Ohio Bee Conference.
Yeah, the COVID thing is still enough up in the air that Jerry began to have some cancellations. You know, he had people coming in from overseas, other countries, other states, and it just got... He had some cancellations and some people that wanted to attend and had to step back. So rather than force the issue, he's just going to postpone it for a year and try it again next time.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a lot of those cancellations happen. And the Washington State Beekeepers Association fall meeting was just announced canceled this week, or postponed to 2022. So
yeah. Well, I hope they can do something virtually. Jerry was going to try it virtually, but it was just not enough time to get it set up, and so next year.
Darn you, COVID. All right. Well, that's too bad. So let's moving right along here. Honeybee Obscura, you guys are really doing a lot of nice episodes. I've been listening to those.
Well, we're getting ready for winter, and you got to get your bees ready, and you got to get your equipment ready, and we're looking at the next couple of weeks, looking at getting your bees prepped for fed and then protection and wrapping. And where I am here in Ohio, wrapping is really important. Mm-hmm. And you got a thin walled box out there between your bees and Old Man Winter, and we like to beef them up. So we'll be talking about getting ready for winter.
Real good. Yeah, and don't forget this time of year that with the honey supers removed is a good time to start to actually do your Varroa treatments as well. If you haven't been doing them all along. Yeah, get them ready for winter. You and Jim did an episode on what to do about hornets and yellow jackets a couple episodes ago. And coincidentally, this I found that I had a great big soccer ball sized Baldfaced hornet nest right outside my barn, right on the pathway to going to the barn. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. But in the area, we have a specialist who comes around and removes yellow jacket and bald-faced hornet nests for free. And he's called the Bee Man, and he gets all these calls for this for this work. And you see his signs, especially this time of year. So I said, well, this is a great opportunity. I did call him. And just yesterday, he showed up to remove the hornets. And he was generous enough with his time to sit down out back while his vacuums were going to sit and talk to me about his business of collecting hornets and yellow jackets.
Yeah, what does he just collect the bees, or is he a venom collector?
He's a venom. He collects the bees, and he, as you'll hear, he sends the bees off to a lab, and they extract the venom.
Oh, that'd be good. I've never talked to one of those people.
Yeah, let's listen to him. He's really easy to talk with. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Thanks for having us out, and thanks for being interested in what we do.
You bet. Thanks for coming. A lot of time, this time of year, beekeepers. Well, first of all, before we get into all of that, tell me a little bit about Cascadia Venom Collection, and then a little bit about yourself as a beekeeper.
Sure. Well, I got into collecting yellow jacket and hornet venom about 16 years ago because I just absolutely fell in love with honeybees and keeping honeybees.
Yeah.
And I was making some homemade bee collection vacuum apparatuses. And I met a gentleman who had started collecting yellow jacket and hornet venom in the Olympia area in the early 70s. And he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the ropes and brought me into the industry. And I've been doing it ever since. It started out as a summer job when I was going to college and just never stopped doing it. Just kept on going. And I just love it. I think it's the coolest job in the world. In our business, Cascadia Venom Collection, we have on a 5 to 6 full-time collectors here in the Olympia area, and we offer free, chemical-free removal of yellow jackets, hornets, and some wasp species.
And so that you limit it to those, but I see on your website, and we'll have the links in the website to your website in our show notes. But you also in the springtime work with honeybees.
We do, yeah, and that's just a hobby. We don't sell any honeybees for venom. There's other businesses that specialize in that. But we do, I do still keep honeybees as a hobby, and so I collect swarms for free and occasionally do cutouts and structural removals too.
Well, so that's a handy skill to have, being able to do cutouts and take the bees at the same time.
It's a lot of messy work.
You mean it's not as nice and neat as it looks like in all those Instagram posts of people?
No, it's not. Not in my experience.
Sitting there in your shorts and your tank top pulling up floorboards.
Oh,
that doesn't work that way, huh?
Not usually. No, it usually ends up just being a full day of getting sticky and getting the job done.
Yeah. No, all right. So Cascadia Venom Collection, you are a beekeeper, so that's really good. And you collect the wasps and the honeybees in season. And so are you doing this year round?
I don't. I work with a network of different collectors all over the world. And so I'm constantly buying and selling insects from all over the world. But here in the South Sound area in Western Washington, we collect yellow jackets starting in June. And we end when the weather turns cold and wet, which is usually the end of September to mid-October.
Yeah.
And then my real work begins where I go through all the collections that we made all summer, and I clean them and package them and ship them to the labs.
Oh, that's the tedious work.
That's the tedious work, yeah. But that's inside, and once the weather turns, I still have something to do.
Well, so let's talk about a little bit about that. So if listeners, you may hear in the background, I'm not sure at this point, you may hear a vacuum going in a whine in the background, and that's a vacuum going that's finishing up the collection process. When you collect the hornets and the yellow jackets, step me through what happens then.
Yeah. Well, we collect the actual insects with a vacuum, and I make these little traps out of juice jugs, like ocean spray jugs, that size. And I put them on a vacuum and put the vacuum next to the entrance of the nest and disturb the nest. And when all of the hornets or yellow jackets come out to defend the nest, they get sucked into my little vacuum trap. And then it takes about half an hour or 45 minutes for all the workers that are out foraging for food or nest material to finish up gathering what they're after and return to the nest. So I just leave the vacuum running for about 45 minutes typically. Larger nests can take up to an hour and a half or 2 hours, but most of the time it's only about 45 minutes for the workers to return. And once I get all the insects, I remove the nest and the job's finished.
Wow. So how many bees do you measure that by the pound, or do you measure them by the number of bees?
Usually, yeah, by the weight. So usually ounces and pounds is how we measure our success for the day. But we get paid by the pound for the insects.
Get back out there. You only got 16 ounces. We need another 32.
And the insects have to be frozen while they're alive, so we carry around coolers of dry ice with us in the field.
Oh, interesting.
And once the collection is finished, the little jug trap is capped and put underneath dry ice, so the insects are frozen. And the venom is just made out of a complex of different proteins, and it's really susceptible to degradation. So once the insects are frozen, they have to stay frozen until the labs extract the venom from them.
Oh, very. So, did you have problems with finding dry ice?
We did actually. Summer? Yeah, last week we did not work because there's a liquid CO2 shortage, a supply chain disruption. So even us venom collectors have been affected by COVID and supply chain issues.
Yeah. No one's untouched by the supply chain disruption. All that dry ice stuck in that Suez Canal ship. Well, that's amazing. So back at the home office, or maybe in your kitchen freezer, you have all these hornets and yellow jackets waiting.
Right.
So what's the next step?
Right. So we collect once they're frozen, then we label bags with the collection date, and they're assigned a collection number, and then they're stored in chest freezers once we get home. And then they're cleaned, and I put them back under dry ice. I take them out of the chest freezer and put them back under dry ice to get them really cold so I can take them out and clean them without them thawing. And then I clean all the debris off, whether it's some dirt from that accidentally got sucked up, or some paper from a bald-faced hornet nest that got sucked into the collection. And then I also have to separate the males from the workers, from the females and queens, because the males don't have stingers, no venom, and they're worthless to the labs. So I just go through the collections. I usually sieve them and then pull the males out and then repack them and ship them under dry ice to the labs.
That sounds like a lot of work. I mean, sitting there, is it a quick sort, or does it take a little while to...
It depends. It can be quick. If the collection's clean, it's pretty quick, and some of them take a long time. A real dirty collection with a lot of males can take, 1 or 2 minutes. And then I just pull out less of the collection. I won't try to clean the whole collection at once. I'll just clean a little piece of it so I can get it back in the freezer before any of the insects start to thaw.
So approximately how many bald-faced worker bees, hornets, does it take for a pound?
We average about 3 or 4 ounces, maybe 3 ounces per nest throughout the season. So the nests really have a pretty short life cycle. We start collecting bald-faced hornets the end of June, beginning of July, and they're mostly done by the end of September. So, and in the beginning, when we first started collecting them, we're averaging half an ounce or an ounce of insects per nest. And this time of year, we're getting 3 or 4 ounces per nest. So on average, we get 3 or 4 ounces per nest.
So that's a lot of nests you're collecting.
That's a lot of nests we're collecting. Yeah, we're a high volume collection operation. We have 5 guys that go out, and we typically do 7 to 8 nest removals a day each.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Many beekeepers will get a call this time of year saying, hey, your bees are in my tree in the Winnie the Pooh type nest. What advice do you have for beekeepers who get that kind of call?
It's pretty tricky. Dealing with ground nesting yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets is pretty dangerous. Ground nesting yellow jackets especially have a really remarkable way of finding their way into little nooks and crannies in your bee suit in a way that honeybees don't. So a bee suit that can keep you safe from honeybees won't necessarily keep you safe from yellow jackets. I recommend calling a professional or doing some research. Using a vacuum is a really effective method to suck them up. You can use a shop vac by the entrance of the nest to collect them. That's a really effective method. With ground nesting bees, sometimes a bucket of soapy water will do the trick if the nest is right near the entrance and it's a pretty small nest. But getting some advice from a local professional is a good way to go if you're unfamiliar with collecting hornets and yellow jackets.
I was just thinking of all the beekeepers around the country, and many of them may not be fortunate enough to live near a professional collector, so
right.
They're stuck to their own devices and their own experiences. But yeah, the yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets can be nasty.
They're very different critters than honeybees, that's for sure.
Are you gearing up for the Asian giant hornet?
Yeah, we've been working with Chris Looney of the USDA and keeping tabs on that. I mean, we're not that far south from where they're finding them now, up in northern western Washington, and we fingers crossed that the WSDA will be successful in eradicating them before they make their way down here, and we'll see. Time will tell.
We've had Sven from the Washington Department of Agriculture on the show a couple times talking about the Asian giant hornets.
Great.
And it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
They can stay up north as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, honeybees definitely don't need any more competition down here.
Although I've wondered, Asian giant hornet versus a bald-faced hornet, who would win?
I wonder.
That would be interesting.
Good question. Well, hopefully we'll never find out.
Yeah. And I would watch that with binoculars. All right, Zach. Well, I appreciate your time this morning. I know you have other places to go. And thanks for picking up my bald-faced hornets and the yellow jackets. So best of luck to you this season. And maybe we'll hear from you down the road.
Sounds great, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. Zach was he was fun to talk to. I'd actually like to follow him around all day from a distance and watch him collect all these hornets. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's. I have some more questions. I think we need to get him back.
I think that would be a fantastic show. He has a lot to offer, and he's a beekeeper as well, so he knows all sides of this story.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Only talked to him real briefly out back, so more time is worthwhile. Hey, coming up, we have Pete Berthelsen from the Honeybee Health Coalition. You know Pete, don't you?
I've met him at a couple of meetings, the national meetings back 2-3 years ago when they were having national meetings.
Having them, yeah.
And he's a guy after my own heart. Yeah. He's a bee and butterfly guy, and what he's going to be talking about today is the Honeybee Health Coalition's aspect on honeybee nutrition. And interestingly, we have several nutrition episodes coming up. So he's the lead off on this. I'm looking forward to talking to him.
Yeah. Pete is part of our 4-part series with the Honeybee Health Coalition. And today we're going to be talking about the forage and its importance. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next several episodes on honeybee nutrition.
Yeah, it's timed right in terms of being able to get ready for next year.
Yeah, just so that our listeners have an idea what we're talking about. This week, we're talking to Pete Berthelsen. Next week, we're talking with Gloria Hoffman from the USDA ARS Tucson lab about seasonal pollens. And then Dave Aston about the good bee, good nutrition, good bee. And also then finally, we're talking to Doris Scott about seaweed extracts for honeybee health. So that's going to be a fun series.
Yeah, like I said, we're getting these guys in now, and it'll give people a chance to overwinter to start getting ready for next year. It's a good timing.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, let's get right into our interview with Pete, but first a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbials Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, and while you're out at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, their regular newsletter full of product information and updates. Hey, sitting across the virtual Zoom table right now is Pete Berthelsen. Pete is part of our Honeybee Health Coalition series. This is number 3. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, great to be here. I'm looking forward to chatting about this stuff today.
We're looking forward to having you here. This is our, as I said, third part. And in this series, we're talking about honeybee nutrition and forage and Pete's role with the Honeybee Health Coalition in this program. Pete, why don't you talk a little bit more about your background, who you are, and what you're doing with Honeybee Health Coalition?
Sure. Well, at its core, I'm a wildlife biologist that has spent my career talking about how to design, establish, and manage high-quality habitat. What I call habitat, beekeepers call forage. And so in the past decade or so, I've really, really become strongly interested in focusing on pollinator health and habitat, because it's offered me the opportunity to take what I've talked about my whole career and talk about it to a much broader audience than people that just care about things like pheasants and quail and those kinds of things, and be able to connect the things that I'm passionate about to water quality, soil health, food sustainability, renewable energy, honeybees, native bees, just all of those things and how they're all connected. So that's a little bit of what my background is, and I'm joining our conversation today from the beautiful Luss Hills of central Nebraska.
Oh, very cool.
Well, Pete. It's good to see you again. We met once at a beekeepers meeting a while back.
Yep.
And you're associated with the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Program. I think you are the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Program, pretty much, aren't you?
Well, I don't know that I would describe it that way. I appreciate that, Kim. But the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, I'm the partnership director, and we have a really, really strong team and board of people that are working on things. And if the listeners of this podcast have never heard of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, they're not alone. We are a young nonprofit that most people have never heard of before. But what we do is we provide one-on-one technical guidance on every project. And then we provide free seed mixtures for projects that are 2 acres or larger, can be on private land, public land, corporate land, which should be interpreted as any land. And right now we focus our efforts on a 12-state region of the Midwest and Great Plains, which happen to be the most important states for commercial beekeeping. The states that are the most important for commercial beekeeping has a really natural match and overlay to the states that are the most critical for the eastern monarch butterfly population recovery effort. So that's kind of where we're at. And for anybody that's listening to the podcast saying, well, why aren't they in my state? Well, we started with 2 states and then grew to 6 and then to 10. And now we're at 12. So my answer to that is we're coming. We're just not there quite yet, but we're having very strategic, thoughtful growth and expansion as a nonprofit. And I'm really excited about what we're doing and what we're accomplishing. And even though we work on very broad pollinator issues, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund was started by commercial beekeepers that cared passionately about their industry, the sustainability of that industry, and the direction that it's going, and the critical role that forage can play in addressing all the different things that are going on in that industry.
Well, that's a pretty big task you've undertaken there, I see. And I'm going to bet that somewhere there's a webpage that Jeff can get and put on our webpage so that they can get a link to you. They can find out more and maybe find out how to be state number 13 and 14, perhaps, eh?
We'd love it. We would love it.
Good.
For some background, we have had Dr. Orly Taylor on the show, too, talking about the monarch migration and the challenges they've had with natural forage areas with the monarchs too. So this all kind of ties together, and we'll make sure those links are in the show notes as well.
And just so you know, Jeff, you're the only person in the world that calls him Orly, other than his mother, probably.
You know, that's
Chip Taylor is how he is known in the world, and he is the monarch man. He's a good friend, and what intelligent, passionate, thoughtful scientist working on monarch butterflies.
Yeah, he probably just had a little bit of indigestion, and he didn't know why, but it's because I called him Orly instead of Chip. Sorry about that, Chip.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
Well, I'll go back to on the Honeybee Health Coalition webpage. There's a lot about what you're doing. There's a whole list of programs and projects you've got going, and also the list of people who belong to the coalition and what role they're playing in these. And it's pretty incredible, the number of people and the number of projects. And I'm looking at a page here, and there's probably 25 or 30 projects. And I know you got your fingers in all of them, but which of these do you think which of the ones are you most interested in? I guess is the question.
Well, first, Kim, let me just say how you kind of brushed on it, and I want to circle back to it because it's really cool and really important. The membership of the Honeybee Health Coalition and how broad it is. Yes. I know of no other coalition to make a difference like this one. I mean, when you go all the way from retail companies, nonprofits, governmental agencies, state and federal, egg industry, honey packers, commercial beekeepers, I'm missing all kinds of things, but most of my career has been spent as I was in my former life, I was the director of habitat partnerships. That means pulling together different groups to have collaborative efforts to do things. What a phenomenal collaborative effort the Honeybee Health Coalition is to bring all of those different groups together, because I'm a lumper, not a splitter. I believe that if you're going to try and solve a big, hairy, audacious problem, and that's what's facing beekeeping and sustainability right now, you have to do it with all hands on deck. And that means we can ill afford to be in a position in which we say agriculture and their chemicals, that's the problem. Has agriculture and herbicides and insecticides had an impact? Absolutely, no question. Does that mean that agriculture should not be at the table and be part of trying to find solutions? I absolutely believe that not only should they be, they have to be for us to be successful. So I guess I just kind of want to throw that out there about the Honeybee Health Coalition, because that's unique. It's really easy to be a splitter and to say, we're good, you're bad. Here's the line, you stay on that side of it. That's not how the Honeybee Health Coalition functions. And I think it is the absolute foundation of why that coalition of the willing is so successful.
Well, I'm reading down the list of members here, and for those of you listening, when you go to the coalition website, take a look at like I said, 25 or 30, maybe 40 members here, and they're all over the map. And what that, I'm going to back up a half a step. If I recall correctly, Jerry Hayes, when he was with Monsanto, was if he didn't do it all, he did a lot of getting this off the ground, right?
He would be what we refer to as the pointy end of the spear. There to bring that group together. I was not fortunate enough to be at the very first meeting. I was at the second one. At the very first meeting, there were people that were in the room that were uncomfortable with other people that were in the room. There's no other way to say it. And through the process of coming together, listening to other points of view, maybe breaking bread with somebody, at a meal, you go out to eat, you talk about things, you network, you get to know people personally. There are incredible relationships and changing thought processes that have happened that have absolutely been fundamental to where we need to be going in the beekeeping industry. So I absolutely salute the people like Jerry and others that just really brought together uncomfortable situations, and it didn't take very long for them to no longer be uncomfortable.
Well, like you just said, being a grouper is always better than being a splitter, and that's certainly how this got going. Well, I'll go back to that list of projects that you were involved in, that your group was involved in, the nutrition group. I'll just say it again. Which of these do you find, I'm not going to say the most interesting, but the most challenging probably is the better one?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Honeybee Health Coalition did was try to take the four main factors that are the death of 1,000 paper cuts that honeybees and beekeepers are going through, and try to put into place some real world examples of how can we address that and make a difference. My portion of being involved in Bee Integrated is the forage portion. I believe that the research is out there. And right now, the first thing that comes to my mind is some of the research out of the University of Minnesota and their bee lab that talks about how if bees have access to high quality forage, that they are better able to withstand the negative impacts of pesticides, of varroa, different diseases and things like that. And so I mentioned this to you earlier. We don't have the ability to control weather. We're struggling with the ability to be able to handle and maintain varroa. Forage, habitat is one of the things that we at least have a chance in being able to handle and control. And so that's where I'm really excited to place my focus and my energy, is getting high quality forage onto the landscape to make a difference.
Enough good food for every bee in the bunch. That's a lofty goal, and something every beekeeper would like to just be able to take for granted, like we were almost able to do 40 or 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that has changed drastically. I like the work that you're doing with the USDA. Mm-hmm. And you've got several projects with them going on CRP land and things. And are they an easy group to work with, or it's a big government organization and they move like glaciers?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a couple stories. I'm going to start out by saying that the U.S. Department of Agriculture is the large aircraft carrier on the sea. They have planes on it and tanks, and they're huge, and they have all kinds of people and all kinds of money. The Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is the little PT boat that's going around by them. We have the ability to be innovative, quick, reactive, and to do great things, but we'll never impact 24 million acres like the Conservation Reserve Program can. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, as that big battleship, it takes a lot of ocean to turn a big aircraft carrier around. And so they are slower to respond and slower to be able to implement some of those changes. So I can just tell you that for me personally, I think improving the seed mixtures that are planted in the Conservation Reserve Program is really one of the top prizes, because that's 24 million acres of land currently. And most of it is located in the portion of our world where it is the most important to commercial beekeeping and the eastern monarch butterfly population and grassland songbirds and food sustainability and soil health and water quality. It is the area where all of these issues come together. And for anybody that's listening, that we're using an acronyms here. CRP stands for the Conservation Reserve Program, and that is a program where the federal government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, offers landowners an annual rental payment to take highly erodible land and retire it from crop production for a period of 10 years. It's the largest, most successful conservation program in the history of this nation. It's done phenomenal things, but it could do so much more if we just had seed mixtures that were planted on there that could have true significant pollinator benefits. It's not a lot of nectar and pollen to be gleaned from grass. If we could have seed mixtures that incorporated the clover species and the wildflower species that benefited all kinds of critters that are out there, we could really, without one additional dime going into the program, we could have 24 million acres of great forage. Think about what that could do, Kim.
Oh, I'll have to sit down and think about that. That's a pretty good thing to imagine.
Hive Alive is a liquid feed supplement for honeybees, and right now is the best time to feed it to your colonies. Hive Alive contains a blend of seaweed extracts, thyme, and lemongrass, a unique formula which improves bee gut health, resulting in more bees, honey, and improved overwinter survival. Now, Hive Alive has just launched their new fondant patty, which contains the correct dose of Hive Alive, vitamins, and amino acids, and comes in easy-to-use pouches which are great for giving to colonies over winter. Ask about Hive Alive at your local beekeeping store or visit the website www.usa.hivealivebees.com for more information.
I can see where when you had that first meeting, you had people in the room that were uncomfortable because you've got also a bunch of programs sponsored by those pesticide companies. Mm-hmm. And how is that working?
I think that there is a broad consensus out there that there is room for conservation on every single farm and ranch in the country. That's where programs like CRP work really well, Kim, because they can be used to address a resource concern on a local farm and ranch. As a landowner, a farmer myself, we have portions of our farm and ranch enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Program specifically to address resource concerns related to soil erosion and water quality and things like that. That can work. And I think that almost any agricultural industry entity, whether you're a chemical company or you're selling seed or you're selling tractors or whatever you're doing, will agree that there is absolutely room for conservation on every farm and ranch in the country. And that reason right there, that answer is why the Conservation Reserve Program has been an option for landowners since 1985. The largest, the longest, the most successful conservation program in the country. 1985. How many federal programs that do this kind of stuff can you think of that have been around since 1985, that long? That's 36 years if I just did my quick math real well. That right there shows how everybody is coming together and supporting that program.
Well, probably looking at it a little bit bigger, supporting the agriculture industry in this country is important for all manner of reasons, and bees and butterflies are one of them, but eating every day is another one that I've grown accustomed to. So I can see why a lot of people should be involved and are involved in this, and it might be uncomfortable working together to make sure that it. I think you used the word earlier about being sustainable, mm-hmm. and that's what this is heading towards, I think.
Oh yeah, the buying habits of this nation are undergoing dramatic changes. Here in central Nebraska, I don't have a Whole Foods or a Costco or anything near me. I just have the hometown market. But if you go into those larger chain stores, every time that I happen to be in one, I just take a look around and note how many things say free range, organic, non-GMO, grass-fed, all of those sorts of things. People are interested in having their food sourced and available sustainably, and they're interested in and willing to pay more for those kinds of products. And that meshes cleanly, like a hand in glove, with what beekeepers want and need for access to high quality forage. It is we could do a whole podcast just talking about that in the future. And that absolutely is a real opportunity that beekeepers need to think about how can they mesh with that. The last point I would say, Kim, is sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And as a nation, we have had cheap, sustainable, ready access to food for lifetimes, decades. And sometimes it's easy to lose an appreciation for that because it's just always been there, But we, as a nation, we have very inexpensive food supplies compared to other places in the world.
Well, it's easy to see how your role with this group of people looking at improving nutrition fits into the Honeybee Health Coalition. I mean, it's certainly, you mentioned before that a well-fed bee is going to be able to deal better with the other stresses that we don't have control of. So I can, your role here is both admirable and obvious. What have we missed?
Well, I guess I would just, because I'm flying the flag of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund on the call today, I would just kind of circle around and button that up by letting people know that that's an available resource for people to help them establish high quality habitat. And the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund operates like, I describe it as a big tent. We're able to provide these resources, our team, because we have broad financial support that runs everywhere from Whole Foods and Costco to retail companies like Target, to commercial beekeeping, to foundations, to the honey packing industry, to crop commodity groups, to egg industry like Bayer and Syngenta and things like that. That's not everybody that's involved, but I tell you that because how many times in this world in which we live in today can you envision a Whole Foods or a Costco working with a Bayer or a Syngenta? Not many, in my opinion, but yet they can all come together to support this common goal and mission that falls under this big tent called the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. I'm very proud of how we are lumpers and not splitters and have that huge wide range of support to be able to talk about things that are really, really important. And, at its core, for this podcast, I would just say the sustainability of beekeeping as an industry, critically important. Think about the people that we all know that are like fourth generation beekeepers. And this generation has had to completely change how their business is sustainable. One of my good friends has the word honey in the name of his business. And he told me one time, our name is wrong. We're not a honey company anymore. We are a pollination services company, and people come and knock on our door wanting to buy honey, and we work on that, but that's not our business anymore. What a complete, utter change in really just a generation in that industry. And I think sometimes the public has a really good understanding that there are problems with pollinator health, whether it's honeybees or monarch butterflies or whatever. but I don't think there's nearly as strong an understanding that beekeeping as an industry is really struggling, and it's related to all of these things. And we hope that by adding access to really good looking, high quality forage, we can do our part of coming up with a solution to all kinds of things.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. One of the things that the Honeybee Health Coalition does on all the different projects and avenues that they're working on is actual tools and resources for beekeepers to gain. And under this heading of forage and nutrition, there is one program or project, the Bee Integrated Demonstration Project. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's something our listeners can actually go out and participate in and make use of.
Yep, that is taking the 4 different aspects that are really weighing on honeybees and their health and that sort of thing, and putting them into a practical application, that looks at the pesticides and the disease and varroa and then forage. And that was where I mentioned that in the Bee Integrated Program, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund supplies access to the forage component of that. But it's a real world example of trying to address all 4 of those factors and to really try to make a difference in honeybee health.
And a coordinated and in concert.
Yep. All 4 things work together. All 4 things work together. Yeah. So, it's in the Bee Integrated Program, just access to high quality forage doesn't work if you're not also implementing a varroa control program, if you're not talking to your local landowners or pesticide applicators and things like that. It is a coordinated approach that brings all 4 of those aspects together.
That sounds really good. We've said this before, Kim. The Honeybee Health Coalition is one of the best kept secrets out there for beekeepers, and the Bee and Butterfly Fund, Habitat Fund, is just another aspect. I'm happy to have Pete on the show and Honeybee Health Coalition the last couple and this year and all the programs that they are funding and leading.
Well, it's not because we're not trying, Jeff.
That's for sure. Part 4 is yet to come.
When you have a big, hairy, audacious problem, it takes innovation, it takes commitment, and it takes collaboration. You have to find ways to bring everybody involved together at the same table. And that absolutely is the hallmark of the Honeybee Health Coalition.
I really like that.
And I think the fact that you, as a beekeeper, need to be able to look at all 4 of those problems. I can't solve, if I solve varroa and my bees are starving, I still haven't solved my bigger problem. What I asked you what we've missed. Is there anything else?
No, I don't think so. Just, this is something that we're really passionate about, and what a great opportunity to chat about this to a much broader audience. So really appreciate the opportunity to come on here today and talk about 2 well-kept secrets, the Honeybee Health Coalition and the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund.
Oh, good. We're glad to be able to do that, share this information with all of our listeners. And when you get a chance, listeners, go to our webpage, and there will be links to the Honeybee Health Coalition and the Bee and Butterfly Fund and a lot of other ones too, but certainly these 2 are worth looking. And when you get to the Honeybee Health Coalition, look at all of it, because there's a ton of information there, not just on nutrition, but on varroa management and all sorts of things. So being part of that, being a integral part of that organization is a good thing to be related to. Pete, thank you for everything today. We appreciate you being here, and I'll go save a butterfly, okay?
All right. Very good.
Thanks, Pete. Keep in touch and let us know how the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund is going, and look forward to having updates.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Lumpers, not a splitter. I like that term. I'm going to have to start using that if I can only remember it. Lumpers and not a splitter.
Or groupers and not a splitters. I like them both, but
yeah,
it certainly describes what they're doing very well, I think.
The whole Honeybee Health Coalition is doing that. I agree. That's really good. Boy, they get their hands in everything and being able to find, hands in agricultural and trying to get the most out of the agricultural lands and the CP, what is it? The
CRP land, Conservation Reserve Program.
And that's really big, and working with those folks.
It is, and he made the good point. The Conservation Reserve Program is basically set out to take land that is not ideal farmland and give it a rest. And you can give it a rest by putting something the bees can eat, or you can put grass on it. And our choice is always something bees can eat. And if they can get that organized, what did he say, 28 million acres? I can't imagine 28 million acres of some kind of legume that bees could eat that would save the soil, improve the soil, and feed bees at the same time.
I agree. I can't imagine. It would be great. And the way it helps everybody. It helps not only honeybees, but all pollinators, which we know that helps honeybees. So
well, when we were talking to him before we started this today, one of the terms that he uses is that it floats all boats, and if you improve 28 million acres of CRP land, the beekeepers are improved, the native pollinators are improved, the farmer, the soil, all of those things get better, and none of them get worse. Nobody suffers, so somebody else can advance. So this is the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of the Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. We want to thank Better Bee for joining us as a supporter. Check out all of their great beekeeping supplies at www.betterbee.com. We want to thank our latest supporter, Hive Alive. Check out their products of honeybee health products at www.hivealive.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else we should mention, Kim?
Well, I'll just say it again. Questions. You got a question, you want to know more about Pete or the Honeybee Health Coalition or any of the topics that we've talked about or some we haven't talked about, send us a note. Use that. You can do it verbally on the hotline on the webpage, or you can send us an email.
Do it. In fact, if you have there's a guest you'd like to have on the show, let us know that too.
Yeah, good.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kim. Right. Thanks, everybody.